This is Josh Wander for Israel365 News. Welcome. This is the headlines for today. In biblical news, we have Trump administration reveals that they gave a Torah scroll to the king of Bahrain as commanded for kings of Israel. In other biblical news, Netanyahu thanks Denmark for voting to allow ritual circumcision. 50 evangelicals get special permission to enter Israel to fulfill Isaiah's prophecy. New archaeological evidence reveals that the kingdom of Judah was more educated than we thought. In medical miracles, research institutions in Israel and the United Arab Emirates jumped to collaborate even before official normalization ceremony. Archaeologists say that an earthquake destroyed this Canaanite palace in Upper Galilee during the Bronze Age. In Jerusalem news, will an investor from Dubai buy an anti-Muslim Jerusalem soccer team? And in the Jewish world, 100 Orthodox rabbis to Jeff Bezos, they say stop using Law Center to classify hate groups. Today we have a special guest on, which is Nadia Matar, famous from the Women in Green and from the Sovereignty Movement. And she's here to give us a perspective on the United Arab Emirates peace agreement. Welcome, Nadia.
Shalom, shalom to all of you. Shalom, Josh.
So Nadia, even within the right wing of Israel, many people are very enamored by this deal. They say that even if it has in it perhaps a pushing off of the current sovereignty of Israel, perhaps keeping the status quo just for a few more years, it's worthwhile in order to gain regional peace and prosperity. What are your comments?
First of all, there is no status quo. Every second that you and I will be talking on the phone right now, the Arabs of the PA are taking over another hill in Judea and Samaria and taking over and building a Palestinian state. So anybody who thinks you can put things on hold and wait for later, that doesn't happen. Anybody who lives here, as you do too, and you know the area, knows that the European Union and other anti-Israeli governments are funding the PA for helping the Arabs to take over Area C. I'm not even talking about Area A and B, who are 40% of Judea and Samaria. So this little dream of trying to stop everything in order to continue and do something later is impossible. But in addition, why should it be? I want to make a few things clear, a few axiomas clear. The land of Israel was given by God to the Jewish people, and the next step of Zionism is not only building in the land, but being sovereign in the land. And that is axioma number one. Axioma number two is that we are not against agreements with Arab countries or with any country, as long as it doesn't come with a price. And we are asking, and when I say we, I represent the Sovereignty Movement. I speak in the name of Judith Katzover, my co-chair, and we are representing the ideological position that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel, but also the practical position that it is possible, and not to just talk in the air about things that can't happen. Why can we not have agreements, on the one hand, which are important against Iran and for the economy, and simultaneously also have sovereignty? Why is it understood that Israel has to pay a price for those agreements? And for those people who think that we are not paying a price, unfortunately, we should listen to Pinchas Bari, who is a commentator, who's somebody on the left, but he's a friend of ours, and he wrote an article and wrote it very clearly. And he wrote the following. I'm quoting what he said a few days ago in an article that he wrote. This is not my quote. He wrote, after we have sobered up from the fake annexation, the time has come to sober up from the fake peace for peace. Because that's what they're trying to sell us, right? That it's peace for peace. So why, Nadia and Judith and Sovereignty Movement, why are you worried? But we are seeing and reading, and we understand it's not peace for peace. He says there's a problem. To understand the plan, the deal of the century, you just have to listen to the program manager, Jared Kushner. They intend that a Palestinian state will arise in parts of the West Bank. The Palestinian state will bring Arab states into an agreement with Israel. So it is the original Saudi plan, he says, but in reserve order, not a state first and then normalization, But first, normalization and then a Palestinian state. And we are saying why? Why is that needed? Why can't we have normalization? We're not against that. And also have Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Who has revived the two-state solution? Why was the two-state solution revived? And that is our concern and our worry. And this morning we called upon all our members to, and the question is asked first and foremost to our own prime minister and our own government. I do not come with any demands to a foreign government, not even our friends from the United States. And we all want wonderful President Trump to win the elections. Let it be clear. But we also want to keep our land, our God-given biblical homeland, and the land of Israel is not allowed to be divided. And unfortunately, according to the deal of the century, and according to what we hear about the Emirates, parts of the land is meant to be given over, God forbid, to the Arab enemy. And we are not going to be quiet about that. We are saying yes to normalization and simultaneously yes to sovereignty, and with no capitulations and no withdrawals by Israel. That is our demand.
So what's fascinating about this, I think, is that the Palestinians, on the other hand, are also very much against this deal because they feel that they've been thrown under the bus. They feel that until now, it's always been said that first we have to have a local peace with the Palestinians before you can talk about regional peace. And now they've just skipped right by the whole Palestinian issue, and they've gone straight to regional peace. So it seems that that this perhaps is something good for the right wing.
The moment what they say, the people who call themselves Palestinians, what they say in public and what they're being told quietly is a very different thing. The very fact that we have heard that Israel was supposed to put aside the issue of sovereignty and to allow basically to continue the deal of the century to be alive and well. And I'm not going to hide it. As I said, on the one hand, we want President Trump to win. On the other hand, we oppose the deal of the century. And I'm saying it very, very clearly, because the deal of the century is bad for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel. It creates a Palestinian state, even if it's in the beginning just in theory. The moment you only agree to sovereignty over 30% of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, and you allocate 70% of the rest to a Palestinian state, plus another 30% in the Negev, which is also part of the deal of the century, not to talk about Jerusalem that's being divided. So the moment we have such a situation, and that we understand that the deal with the Emirates, because if you read, I have here the deal of the century. When you read the fourth paragraph, the absence of formal relations between Israel and most Muslim and Arab countries has only exacerbated the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. We believe, they say here in the deal of the century, that if more Muslim and Arab countries normalize relations with Israel, it will help advance a just and fair resolution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, i.e., normalization. Its purpose is to bring about the creation of a Palestinian state. So the Arab Palestinians are not crying, and they know very well that they're getting a good deal. The ones who have to cry are those who believe that this land belongs to the Jewish people, and we have to warn against this. We have to say no to normalization with the creation of a Palestinian state, yes to normalization with Israeli sovereignty over the land of Israel. That is what it has to be. Why is it that Israel needs to make concessions? Why can't we have both? We have to get out of this frame of mind that whenever we want peace, Israel has to give something. Those who need this peace more than us is the UAE. They need America against Iran. They need American support. Why do we need, what did they give up? What did they, where's their capitulation? And therefore we are here, the sovereignty movement, saying God gave us this land. We have no right to give it away. We have no right to postpone sovereignty, because there is no postponement. There is no status quo. And we want peace. We want agreements, but we do not want to give up on 1 inch of our God-given biblical heartland. Very simple.
Be argued that you asked about the UAE giving up something. You could be argued that the UAE has given up a lot. They have basically gone against the majority of the Arab world. with their position vis-a-vis Israel. And that is something that is extremely unpopular in many countries. So they risk the creating a rift between them and many of the Arab neighbors in order to have this normalization with Israel. And again, we're not necessarily, Tom, just to be a devil's advocate here, we're not necessarily talking about getting rid of sovereignty, just a delay of sovereignty while things are figured out.
As I told you before, we cannot have a delay because if the situation was, and again, I would be against that too, but if the situation was where you can put everything on hold, the situation it is today, and you would say, I want to delay it and keep it like this, the way it is, you take a picture of the entire area and that's the way it stays. I also would oppose it because I think we should promote sovereignty anyway. But that's not the case, because as I told you, even now, the few minutes that you and I spoke on this show, I look outside my window and I see the Arabs taking over more and more empty land in Area C, because they're building a Palestinian state de facto, quietly. They're doing it. So you cannot have a situation, you don't have a deluxe situation where you can just say, let's wait and hold on to have normalization, and then let's have a Palestinian state, and then let's have sovereignty. And it's also a little bit of tricking yourself, because as we hear from the United Arab Emirates representatives, and I believe them when they speak in the media, they said it very clearly, and I have a quote here also, that the reason or the way they got to this peace agreement is because Israel promised to take sovereignty off the table. So why do you think that in a few years, when we'll have, let's say, more normalization, and let's say we do what you suggested, we put sovereignty on hold, why would they then agree to have sovereignty if now that was a condition to have peace with us? So we should do exactly the opposite. We should have an Israeli leadership that says, you want peace, you want your F-35, you want those special airplanes, you want other things, okay, but we are going to make peace out of strength, out of Zionism, out of belief in the Tanakh, in the Bible, that this land is ours and we have no right to give it away or to put it on hold. The land of Israel cannot be divided, and that is exactly what is being done now, and that is what we are warning against. Yes to peace, no to division of the land.
Nadia, my final question has to do with the popularity of your position. I think that sovereignty around the country is widely accepted. People would love to have sovereignty, especially the way that you have put it out. It seems like a very natural and very logical way of doing things. On the other hand, I think that the country is overwhelmingly enamored by this idea of regional peace, and I don't think they would be willing to up that for sovereignty. What are your thoughts?
Again, we didn't ask to give it up for sovereignty. If I have to repeat it once again, we can have both simultaneously and should have a leadership in Israel calling for both simultaneously, also for peace agreements and also for sovereignty. One should not come at the expense of the other. That is our position. And about the people who support the sovereignty, as you know, the majority of the right wing support sovereignty. The Likud voted unanimously in favor of Israeli sovereignty over the Jewish settlement enterprise. 1,500 people voted in favor of it. All the ministers are in favor of it. And obviously, we always have to, talking about it being enamored, we always have to be careful about the beautiful promises one has. We were also enamored in the beginning with the Oslo agreements. We pray and hope that this is not going to lead to the same direction as Oslo, but we always have to keep our feet on the ground and on the land of Israel and make sure that no agreement comes at the expense of our God-given biblical homeland, because duty-free and nice hotels are very nice, but that's the now and that's the physical. Let's remember that we have here a spiritual and a physical country here that we have to safeguard, and no duty-free and no nice trips and vacation should be paid with the price of the land of Israel. And that is what, again, I'm repeating it. We are in favor of peace agreements as long as it doesn't harm our God-given biblical homeland.
Thank you, Nadia, for coming onto the show. We hope to have you back again.
All the best.